Welcome back to Witch Church. It's Mal. And hey, guys, it's good to be with you. We've arrived at the August 2025 Big Three episode. As you guys know, if you've been listening along this whole year, the Big Three is when I invite on a fellow astrologer guest to join me to talk about the big three, aka the top three transits of the month ahead, plus the lunations, the full moon, and the new moon. It's been such a great, fun little journey so far. However, for some reason, I was like, we got to mix it up in August. And I decided to invite Rebecca Scolnick on to talk about the numerology of August. And it ended up being such a fruitful conversation. I hope you guys will enjoy it. Before I let you guys in onto that conversation, I'm just going to do a little solo moment with the astrology of August and give you guys some important turning points of this month. Something that stood out to me from my interview with Rebecca is August is really full of like twists and turns and inherently does present us with that sort of rebirth energy. And I think the astrology really reflects that as well. So I thought, let's just take you guys through the big three plus the lunations by myself, if you guys don't mind. And then we'll veer into my interview with Rebecca. So let's hop into it. And I'm going to pull up the charts. So, what I find interesting about August is that we start off right after the Mercury Cazimi in Leo. And as we might have heard, since everybody's talking about it, Mercury is retrograde and will be retrograde until he stations direct on August 11th. He will also be in his shadow, the post-retrograde shadow, all the way until August 25th. But right around the very end of July, beginning of August, we hit that Cazimi point, which is when Mercury joins the sun. And this also marks the halfway point of the retrograde. Now, last month, me and my guest, Anne Sundell, talked about this Mercury retrograde, but I feel called to talk about it again and spotlight it as one of the big three transits for August, because I do still feel like it's a main player with everything going on in August. And again, something we talked about last month is that Mercury is only retrograde in Leo. There's no backing into other signs. This whole thing is taking place just in the sign of Leo. And this is really interesting because I see Mercury retrograde periods as moments of deep reflection, moments of maybe reassessing how we're going about certain things in our lives. This one in particular, being in Leo, I think has a lot to do with our relationship to ourselves, our relationships to maybe the past identities we've assigned ourselves, and how we can give ourselves permission to change, like I'm even thinking about an identity that I had assigned myself in the past was something akin to, this sounds kind of depressing, but like I really did, I for a lot of my life, I had chronic depression. So identifying with the label of being chronically depressed, that was like a big part of how I saw myself, definitely in my teens and early 20s, until I was able to find like the right therapist and the right treatment plan and all of that kind of stuff. And that's particularly been coming up lately, like this sense of not over identifying with that anymore and allowing some sort of new identifiers to come in, right? And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad to identify with things that might cause us like real suffering or might be a real challenge in our lives. But I think this Mercury retrograde might, in a way, bring us closer to maybe the suffering and the challenges that we're unconsciously identifying with. Like, for instance, let's say you really don't like your job and you're coming home every single day and you tell your partner, I hate my job, I hate my job. And suddenly you become identified with this idea that you are a person who hates their job. And within that identity, there's very little room to shift, evolve, and grow. Because in a way, sometimes the way we identify is kind of like an agreement. And some of those agreements are fine and dandy, neutral, even good. Like, I don't know, I can say I'm gay. That's an identity that feels good and good to me. And like, but there are other identities that we can hold true that over time might not be the healthiest or even the most true narrative about our existence. So, something about Leo. I mean, Leo is the sign of how we are like unique little snowflakes. Leo says you are an individual and you have this identity and you have this unique identity that is special and true to the frequency of your soul. I'm even thinking about the sun and the meaning of the sun in ancient astrology really has to do with the soul's journey, how the soul travels from lifetime to lifetime, but still keeps a particular essence about it. And the sun being the ruler of Leo, think about that. Like, no matter how you identify in various meat suits throughout your soul's existence, still there's like this part of you that rings true, and that part is the soul. So I wonder if there's something about this Mercury retrograde in Leo that brings us a little bit closer to the soul, brings us a little bit closer to the narratives we've been identifying with that don't actually serve our highest good. And I think we're doing a lot of reevaluating when it comes to, I think when it comes to the stories we have about ourselves. And I just want to fast forward on the screen quickly to the moment Mercury will station direct, which will be around August 11th. Mercury actually stations direct in like a loose opposition with Pluto, and also a loose sextile to Uranus and Mars. Uranus at 1 degree Gemini, Mars at 2 degree Libra, Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius, and then we've got Mercury stationing direct at 4 degrees Leo. That for me, in a nutshell, says, wow, I realized something pretty important during this period. Like, I took the time to meditate. I took the time to really examine how I'm narrating my existence. And now I'm really shifting something to move forward. Okay, so very powerful Mercury retrograde. And speaking of Mars, this kind of brings me to August 6th, which is the day Mars will move into Libra. Now, keep in mind, guys, right now, when any planet moves into any cardinal sign, it will automatically enter into a relationship with both Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune are sitting at 1 degree Aries. So the minute that Mars moves into Libra on August 6th, he enters into an oppositional relationship with Saturn and Neptune. This is a little spicy, and you'll hear it later in the segment with Rebecca. At some point, she says something about like girding your loins. And I'm like, all right, the numerology is saying gird your loins, but also the transits around August 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th are also kind of communicating a similar message. Now, let's start with Mars in Libra opposing Saturn in Aries. There's a little bit of mutual reception here because Mars actually prefers to be in Aries, where Saturn is sitting. And Saturn actually prefers to be with Libra, where Mars is sitting. So even though they're kind of beefing, they're beefing at this oppositional point, they're also kind of sorting something out. And I think even though a Mars-Saturn opposition can often be about conflict, there is a very, very clear resolution period that comes after this opposition. And it's clear to me, looking at the month ahead, that whatever conflicts or challenges or interpersonal dynamics we enter into around that beginning of August, actually, they make us better. We become better for facing that conflict. We allow the conflict to heal us and bring us closer to secure attachment. Now, remember, Mars, his nature is kind of to be selfish, not in a bad way, but Mars moves in a way that is kind of impulsive. And it's a little bit like, I see it, I want it, I got it, I'm going. At his optimal prime energy, Mars doesn't really want to worry about what others are doing or thinking. He just wants to do his thing. That's why Mars likes to be in Aries. Mars in detriment in Libra. I was checking my essential dignities in my head. Mars in detriment in Libra. Yeah, he's kind of mad in Libra. Why is he mad in Libra? Because he has to ask, his roommate or his wife or whatever, if something's okay, if he goes out and, has a beer with his friends. Like there's something like that where in Libra, Mars is forced to consider others. But I think the gift of a Mars in Libra transit is that others become the key to our own resolutions, because the reflections that we get from others end up changing our perspective. And while we otherwise would have tried to deal with the problem ourselves, I think while Mars is in Libra, we're like, no, I need help. I need reflection. I need to bounce this idea off of someone. Actually, two minds are greater than one. That's something that comes to mind with Mars in Libra. Now, yesterday, I was, some of you guys know, I work part-time at an acupuncture clinic in Chicago. And we have this vendor who sells her honey, her local honey, at our clinic. So she came in with like a new round of honey. And she started telling us, like, yeah, I raised the prices on this honey because the bees have a virus and they're making less honey because of it. And I was like, oh my God, those poor bees. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, well, of course the bees have a virus. Of course the bees have a virus because Mother Nature mirrors to us something about our relationships to each other and also to Mother Nature itself. So when the bees are mirroring a virus to us, I think there's kind of something going on about our ability to work together. Of course, when we think about the sort of spirit animal, if you will, of the bee, we think of a organism that is fundamentally intertwined in the group's dynamic. And there's no such thing as a bee who has like toxic individualism, right? Like there's no such thing as a bee who's like, okay, guys, like gotta go. Like I'm kind of over this. I'm gonna go start my own hive by myself. Like that's kind of impossible. The bees need each other to make their hive and make their honey. And like they're just like an inherently relational being. And you might think like, wow, yeah, that's so true. Like a bee cannot exist in isolation. But neither can humans. You know, we don't tend to think of ourselves, at least in American culture, we don't tend to think of ourselves as interdependent as the bee is, but we are. We deeply, deeply are. And I think there's something about this Mars transit in Libra, which again begins August 6th, and this Mars opposition to both Saturn and Neptune. There's a little bit of like a collective ego check of the circumstances where we're so ignorant to think that we can be on this isolated island, or we can just worry about ourselves, or yeah, I'm just going to do my own thing. I find myself saying that a lot. I'm just going to do my own thing. Like there's something about this point in August, again, like probably August 6th, 7th, 8th, even into the 9th, where our egos just get checked. We're like, oh, wait, I can't really do this without others. I can't heal my attachment wounds by myself. I can't make the honey without without the group, you know? So I just thought I'd mention that because I think the honeybee is such a important spirit guide at the moment, especially with this Mars in Libra transit, maybe invoking some tension between our individual desire to do our own thing, quote unquote, and how much we are like deeply collective relational animals. If you're picking up what I'm putting down. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I would mark, I think maybe the hardest points of this month are in the beginning, that like first week and a half with that Mars opposition to Saturn. It's going to be a little bit of a toughie, but probably leading to something kind of good. And we'll talk about that soon with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction on the 12th. First, though, before we get to that, I want to take us to the full moon, which is on August 9th. Okay, so August 9th, we have this full moon perfecting around 16 degrees, give or take, of Leo. But this is the full moon in Aquarius. That's kind of interesting. I didn't really realize, but yeah, I mean, Leo and Aquarius also bring up those archetypal themes between individuality versus the collective. So we kind of have that in a few different places this month. This full moon in Aquarius is being ruled by the Saturn conjunction with Neptune, which happens to be opposing Mars, which we just talked about. Because Aquarius, this is the full moon in Aquarius, Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn. We might take our eyes to Saturn in Aries, what Saturn in Aries is going through at this moment. Yeah. Insert everything I said about the honeybees into this full moon. I think that, again, that collective versus individual theme is coming up. The other thing I think about too with Saturn and Aries ruling this full moon, Saturn and Aries really doesn't like the new beginning. Saturn is inherently so much better at the ending. You know, Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, which are the penultimate signs of the zodiac. Saturn likes to build and establish and make things that are very long lasting. So that's why Saturn's crabby in Aries. You put Saturn right at the beginning. Yeah, you put him at the beginning and he has to start over. He has to start over, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't like building in an environment where nothing is established, which is Aries, right? Mars, on the other hand, can really thrive in that environment because Mars doesn't really think too much. They just want to go, do, which is good if you're in Aries. But Saturn wants to establish and build and create legacy, which is harder in Aries. So I think I'm going to call this full moon the uncomfortable new beginning. The uncomfortable new beginning. I also want to call this full moon something about like embracing fully what you truly want without fear. I don't know why that's coming to me, but I feel like there's some kind of permission we might be giving ourselves on the full moon to release any sort of societal expectations or fear of societal judgments about what we truly want, and just kind of going for it. And I think that might have to do with the tension between Saturn and Aries and Mars and Libra. It might also be that Aquarius Leo, the Aquarius Leo dichotomy, which again is individual versus collective. But I think there's a lot to be released on this full moon, especially when it comes to letting go of it needing to all be perfect with the new beginning. I mean, I cannot tell you guys, talk about my new beginning. I mean, my new beginning involves trying to get a nomad visa in Italy, which is one of the most bureaucratically confusing parts of the world. I'm just even thinking about my visa journey and like how much of a clusterfuck it kind of is. Like, of course, Saturn does not like this new beginning. He does not like trying to build a beginning in chaos. But yet, when you're trying to build a beginning in chaos, there's something like, there's a level of letting go you can do where you're just fully in some kind of agreement that nothing is going to be perfect and everything is going to go wrong. So you might as well just start it, because there is no perfect time. Maybe that's also co-title of this full moon. There is no perfect time when you're beginning your dream in a chaotic state. Yeah. But I don't think the difficult relational dynamics last the whole month per se. And this will bring me to transit number 3. On August 12th, we have that Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer. Holy crap. This should go on your calendar. This August 12th conjunction. I'm excited. I mean, we've got Venus in Cancer answering to Jupiter. Well, answering to the moon, I guess. But Jupiter is in his exaltation in Cancer. I mean, both benefics are super happy. And the benefic planets tend to bring us positive results and positive things. And when I'm thinking about the month as a whole, the month is a lot about our ability to approach conflict with grace, to even face conflict from the get-go instead of running away from it, and realizing that conflict can strengthen our relational dynamics. So when I look at, by August 12th, Venus meeting Jupiter in Cancer, I think, wow, like there could be some profound forgiveness, some profound release of baggage. Like this almost evokes to me 2 friends who have been fighting for years, and finally they both are able to like put their swords down, and they're like sitting together, hugging and crying into each other's shoulders because they are so happy to have moved past the conflict, but also sad at the time that was lost together because of the conflict. And that's really coming to me, like the idea that there's some sort of forgiveness vibe in the name of life being too short, which sounds cheesy. But like, there's something here about like a deep release of sadness, anger, resentment. And I think Cancer, being the mother archetype, can really give us that ability to kind of see the inner child in everybody. I mean, when I think about, my relationship with like a parent or my relationship to someone who's hurt me, I'm not saying we always have to give grace to the people who have caused us trauma. But I am saying, when I think about the people who have given me a tough time in life or caused me distress, and I think about their inner child and what their inner child has gone through, it actually helps me make sense of the situation and release anger and graduate more towards forgiveness. Forgiveness, we tend to think of it as like this big moment where we release this resentment and we let go, and like that in itself is why forgiveness often feels so intangible, because how the heck would you reach such a beautiful, joy-filled moment with someone who's hurt you, right? So we give up on forgiveness sometimes because we're like, well, that's so intangible. But I'm telling you, forgiveness doesn't have to be this like happy, joy moment. It can literally be like coming to a place of neutrality with something. It can be the realization that you don't care that much anymore. Like it can be the realization that you're never going to have to deal with that again. There's like really this beautiful moment of catharsis, I think, on August 12th with that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. It might have to do with the more timely conflicts we're getting into in August, but it might have to do with like a deeper conflict that's more embedded into our subconscious, that has to do with like our parents or our family lineage or something along those lines. Could even be like a karmic connection. Recently, wow, there was like this big like learning moment with a client, watching their karmic connection with someone they viewed as the enemy, quote unquote. And to be honest, like, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with them. Like, I'm like, yeah, that person's the enemy in the story. At some point, though, my client had this profound moment where they chose to forgive that person. They did it by like writing a letter. And I swear to you guys, like within 2 days of that, this massive release happened where the enemy just kind of like left their life in like a very like seamless way. And I was like, that can't be a coincidence. Like, that had to be some kind of karmic story, right? Where like they agreed in this lifetime that they had to meet again. But once they could kind of forgive each other, it would just move on seamlessly. So think about that. What's that cheesy saying? Like, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies or something. That's kind of what this Venus Jupiter conjunction seems to be fighting against. Like this Jupiter Venus conjunction on the 12th is like, okay, like I'm ready to release this big thing. And as I say that, like, you guys hopefully can't hear this, but like the rain is just pouring down behind me. So insert the Hillary Duff song, Coming Clean. That's a good song. That's a good song for Venus Jupiter conjunction on the 12th. And to wrap it up, guys, that brings us to the 23rd of August. That'll be our new moon. And let's see, our new moon on the 23rd. We've got the new moon at 0 degrees Virgo. Uh-oh. Just kidding. But there is a bit of an uh-oh with this new moon, just seeing that it's going to be in a square with Uranus in Gemini. And if you're into the in conjunct and yods too, this full moon is in a yod with Pluto and Saturn as well. So remember how the full moon was kind of like committing to the new beginning, even though it's kind of frustrating and it's a little bit chaotic, but you're releasing your perfectionism and just going to like buy into the fact that whatever new thing is around the corner is just going to be a little bit chaotic, and that's okay. That was the full moon on the 9th. By the 23rd, this new moon in Virgo, we're really like in it now. We're really in kind of planting the seed that has a unique flavor to it, because the seed that we're planting has a square to Uranus. And squares to Uranus for me often evoke the black sheep archetype. The black sheep archetype is about being misunderstood, feeling like an outsider, being the cycle breaker of your family or ancestral lineage. The black sheep often has to carry the story that they have to kind of accept that they're not going to fit in. And that ends up being their beauty, because from that place, they can really make their art, walk their path, start their journey, and just accept that their journey is going to be a little bit different. So I think there's like this acceptance coming in around the new moon. That just has to do with like, even collectively, guys, I mean, what we've been conditioned to want, what we've been conditioned to want to have is growing more and more impossible. And that is a curse in some way. Like, what have we been conditioned to want? We've been conditioned to want like marriage, kids, a good job, and to own a house. Is that a good like wrap up of what we've been conditioned to want? And in this current world, it's becoming increasingly more financially and socially impossible for the average person to obtain those things. And I'm a Pluto in Sagittarius, right? And at 0 degrees. So, I kind of emphasize or empathize with both Pluto in Sag and Pluto in Scorpio, that sort of millennial Gen Z middle ground of like, I'm not the generation that like is dreaming about buying a house because that's going to be probably impossible for me. Like, and what's even more frustrating is sometimes those Pluto in, sometimes not all of them, but Pluto in Leo, Pluto in Libra, they're kind of looking at the younger generations being like, well, why don't you want that? And we're like, well, it's not that we don't want that, but the world is set up where we have to find alternative routes. And I think there's something about this being the alternative route new moon. It's the alternative route new moon because there's something about embracing the inner black sheep archetype and figuring out your own way of doing it. And figuring out if the world is collapsing, it actually makes it easier in a weird way to claim what it is that we want because we just care less about what other people think of us. And we care less about societal conditioning because why would we care about that if it's only led us to this current destruction? So I think it's a really important time by the 23rd to embrace the inner weirdo, if you will. and just kind of go into the next step with a little bit of not caring so much about how your path looks to another person. That's what I'll say. That's what I'll say about this new moon. So that was the big three, guys. I'm so excited. I want to just quickly introduce you to our guest. She has been on the Witch Church podcast before. Rebecca B. Scolnick is a writer, witch, and weirdo who wants to help make meaning out of mess. Her books, The Witch's Book of Numbers and Marriage by the Numbers, are out now, and she pens Swimming in the Soup on Substack. She's also 1/3 of Call Your Coven, Practical Advice for Nonsensical Times, which is a new podcast that blends numerology, astrology, and tarot into one monthly forecast. B lives in Los Angeles with the love of her life, her wife, and their pup. And I'll have all of B's links below, all of her books, her amazing podcast, her amazing Substack, and you guys are just going to love the numerology forecast for August as well. And thanks for listening, guys. Comment below on YouTube if you enjoy this episode. You were last on Witch Church for episode 91 in 2021, and we talked about life path numbers, which I'm going to link in the show notes if anybody wants to re-listen to that. But that being said, it's been too long since you've been on Witch Church, but I consider you a Witch Church member, of course.
Thank you. Yes, I believe myself to be in the congregation, of course. And yeah, when you said 2021, my first thought was I didn't even know you in 2021. Like, I can't actually believe we've known each other that long.
I know, it's crazy. I feel like we really caught each other in the like 2020/2021 witches Instagram, like kind of the peak of those internet relationships. And now this is just what we are now, but back then it was like it felt more unique, like, oh, I'm gonna have I have an internet friend and they're a witch, and
Yes, I know. I feel like the beginning years of the pandemic were really when it did become fun and trendy and all of the things to be a witch on the internet. And you're right, there is a bit of it that's like, okay, this is just who I am now. And
actually.
yeah, actually, I've grown or not outgrown. I've just outlived like that bubble of time. And it's so lovely to still be connected and to still be doing this work. What episode are we on now? Do you know?
Oh gosh, I think we might be like 250, 260 something. So we've yeah, we're in it now.
Are you aware of like how amazing that is?
Oh
Just
my
one
gosh,
run show?
thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's been a long time doing the show, and now we're into like 250 episodes. Granted, I don't do interviews as much as I did back in 2021 and 2022, but it's still like such a joy to have. Now I can have people on like a second time, which I've been trying
Yeah.
to do lately, like have the original alumni guests back on. So this is great that
Well,
you're joining
it's
us.
perfect timing and I'm so happy to be here. So, thanks for having me.
Yes. And it was just okay. So it was my intuition that we needed your numerology talents for our August 2025 forecast. And 2025 is a collective 9 year, and August is a collective 8 month, which I think is funny because I am a life path 9 and you are life path 8,
I
which
am.
I
You
didn't
are.
realize until after I got this idea. Oh, I should have B on for the show this month, and I was like, oh my god, it's perfect because we will probably mainly be chatting about 9 and 8, and you and I are literally that frequency together, so it's great.
That's amazing. Yes, and this was the perfect year to be talking about these two numbers and specifically looking at the combination of monthly and yearly numbers because nine in math does this really weird trick where it essentially disappears in the calculation. And so, whatever you're adding to the number nine, you'll ultimately get the same number in your equation as long as you're reducing by addition. So, for those who are scared of math, just like me, A, you're not alone. B, calculators exist. And C, this is in layman's term what I'm talking about. So, in August of 2025, we are looking at the digit eight because August is the eighth month of the year. So then we add our eight to our nine to find our monthly cycle number for August. So that's 17. And then we reduce 1 plus 7 equals 8. So we can see that we're getting that same number again. So 9 means that each month this year, we're experiencing each digit in its full expression, like all the good, all the bad, all the beautiful, all the gnarly, and everything in between. And then because I know you want to do more math right up front. No, because everyone loves to learn something about themselves. Because of this nine as well, it means that when we calculate our own yearly and monthly cycles, that nine is disappearing as well. So we're experiencing like your yearly cycle. I would add my birth date of 7/7 just happened. We have a little double energy there to nine, that yearly cycle, which would get me to, uh, if I took away nine, it would just look at 14.5 in this calculation. And so my, what's called my public persona, just the month and the day of my birth, is actually the same as my yearly cycle this year. So we're
Wow.
all, yeah, we're like all in this really concentrated numerological soup. And I think it vibes really well with the astrology this year because boots on the ground for numerology, we're like, these are the building blocks. One, two, three, four, five. And then in the sky, all the planets are like, hey, we're going to switch places for the first time in forever. So,
Wow.
yeah, so we're getting to experience like a lot of concentrated, like complex, but also kind of simple energy down here while all the planets really take us for a ride this year.
It makes perfect sense that it would be collectively chaotic, at least in the astrology realm, and then for that to be reflected as well in the numerology of this year, to be almost like very pure energy of like, this is it. We're not, it's not two tarot cards combined into like a message. It's just the one major arcana card in a way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, that's the whole. So it's big extremes. And so for anybody who is in the less desired extreme, I
Yeah.
personally am with you. For anybody who's watching, I'm literally bald from cancer at the moment. So like I'm definitely in that soup with you. But I do feel like at least it narrows the focus and it gives us something to look at, and it's like, okay, if all else fails, I can look at one digit this year. I can just look at this one number per month. Like you said, we're not combining, we're not trying to divine messages out of this. It's like, what does eight feel like? Because that's it.
Hmm. Yep, yep. Oh my gosh, it makes perfect sense. And thanks for taking us through the math, because the math is mathing, but it's making sense.
And I did just throw a lot of math at you, so I can make sure that all of this is in a form that's like legible for everyone to read
We'll
because
we'll have something in the show notes if we have some
there we
visual
go.
learners in there. But I think it's gonna be perfect. And if believe me, if I could get it, then I think most people can get it. Because I also am the type of person who's like, I'm only good at math in one context, and that's astrology math.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which I think if we knew that like a lot of spirituality was math, I don't know that we all would have like so readily signed up to do it.
Exactly. Well, I want to know like a little bit more about, just if you feel comfortable, like telling us what you've been experiencing in this 9 year, and also maybe
Yeah.
some any other thoughts too about collectively how you've been seeing nine show up in 2025 so far.
Totally. Yeah. So nine, I've been looking at this year as a wrap up, but also as kind of, we look to when we're in a 9 year, which is the last year in a set of numerological yearly cycles. So they do run in groups of nine. And we can always look back to the 1 year and kind of see what was the story that was starting here that now is coming to a close in a 9 yearly cycle. And so my biggest thing, and not to enter politics into the chat, but it's just like one of the cultural things that we all can identify with and are all aware of, is that in 2017, which was the 1 year of this cycle, we saw Trump's first term. And here we are in the bookend of 2025, and we're seeing Trump's second term. So there was a big part of me that was like, oh, I don't think we're getting out of this story yet, just looking at kind of these symbolic energies. But now we're at this bookend. So in 2025, my four words at the beginning of the year, and now we'll see how well my memory does, were humanity, completion, solitude, and one more that's escaping me. And you'd think solitude was the one that was escaping me, but I'm like, no, I'm actually really good at that one this year. Um, but nine is big mental energy. It is the last of the building block numbers. So it is the ending. It's about completion. It's about the all. So that's why humanity was kind of the number one term that I looked at, and especially because we are living in a global time where we have all this information at our fingertips. and we're in everybody's business, so to speak, in terms of not only governments, but also we know what's going on in other countries in a way that we never would have known before now, as we're seeing kind of the culmination of the technology that's also been building over the course of the last 9 years, which we've seen the rise of misinformation. We've seen the rise of kind of the shadow side of the internet, where it's like we're not sure what's real. We're not sure exactly what we're looking at. We need to start using some more discernment. And so that's one of the lessons of nine as well, is nine is a very mature energy. It says we need to bring wisdom to the situation. We need to not forget what we've been through. We need to take our experiences and mine the knowledge out of that. Like, what are we supposed to know based on what we've learned and experienced, and how do we put that to work in the world? Because, oh, this is the fourth word, service. Of course, nine is all about service. So if we're talking about humanity, then we're also talking about how are we showing up in service to ourselves, in service to our families, our communities, our friends, and then also our larger kind of human body. So I see a lot of nine already happening in terms of all four of those keywords. I did make some predictions at the beginning of the year that we were going to see a lot of immigration heavy stuff. We were going to see a lot of people, present company maybe included, that we were going to see a lot of people starting to think, where do I want to be? Do I want to make a move? Am I done with this version of my life? Do I want to get a new job? Do I want to get a new partner? These are questions kind of that we're asking ourselves this year. And then on this global scale, we're seeing tariffs, we're seeing global trade, we're seeing communication happen or not happen. We're seeing nine is definitely the number of the humanitarian. So then the flip side of that is the fascist, or somebody who wants things to go a certain way. We're either understanding each other as a whole, or we have no understanding of one another, and we're now just in total control mode. So I don't know if I if I exactly answered your question, but there's a lot that I'm observing about nine energy that I think is really coming in hot. And then also just the constant pace of it. It's like this year just has not let up yet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure. And I'm not a numerologist, but the whole year I've been thinking this is a 9 year, this is a 9 year, that sort of completion of some karmic cycle. And what
Hmm.
I've noticed with individuals maybe burning off, quote unquote, some sort of karmic energy, usually there's chaos that ensues. Like when you're going through a breakup and you're burning off karmic energy with someone else, like, there's a lot of like really hard to wrangle emotions. That's just one example of it, but we're seeing that on a collective level of, I think, us facing something that is not only rooted in this life, but I think there's past lives coming up,
Oh,
no
yeah.
question. uh,
Yeah, I mean, we're in big, like, historic cycles. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Like we're repeating history in a lot of ways, in really horrible, unthinkable ways. And thinking about how that relates to the nine as the cycles, we're supposed to be wiser every 9 year though, because we're supposed to have learned something or whatever it may be. And I'm not saying we're not wiser now than we were the last 9 year. But I think that might be kind of the point of a 9 year. Like, what wisdom have I gained? What was I meant to pass down? And also the spectrum of ancestral wisdom and the wisdom that comes from maturity, like the Hermit card, like that spiritual maturity. And then the spectrum, I think, is ancestral trauma and how our trauma uh that hasn't quite been worked out yet on this plane gets then in the way of us getting to the other end of the spectrum of ancestral wisdom. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
It makes so much sense. There's so much. Put a pin in emotions because we're going to get back there for August. You said like the best thing for August, and I was going to segue us, and then you said the best thing for nine. So now we're going backwards. Um, but what you're talking about is so key to nine because nine is this mental energy. And so it's to know and it's also to not know. And so a lot of times we want to say that learning makes us better. And that's just like human nature to want to be striving to be better. But I think learning is just like, what do we know how to do now that we didn't know how to do before? And so, especially with some of this ancestral trauma that you're talking about, it's like, how did we learn the lessons and what lessons were they? And then now, with this know or not know piece, now we're talking about wisdom versus ignorance. Now we're talking about looking
mm,
versus shying away from. Now we're talking about reflection, being able to reflect and be aware of our behaviors and turning away and saying, no, I don't want to look at that. I actually have spent a lot of time learning this viewpoint or this one perspective, and I'm not interested in the others. So learning can also make someone very narrow, and learning violence, like learning lessons through violent means, doesn't mean that that violence gets erased if the people aren't willing to reflect. So I feel like we're dancing around a lot of things, but I just without really like saying words, but I see it on collective and individual levels this year. So I think it's probably good to keep it more general. It's like you can't engage with that which you're not ready to look at. And so we are watching ourselves and others make choices this year to either lean in or look away.
totally. Wow. Yeah, I have chills, and I really feel like the ancestors are like channeling through us right now. I feel it. But one thing I will say, what you just said reminded me. The other day, I was just like kind of listening to someone else have a conversation about a parent, their parent who passed away, and they said something along the lines of like, my parent was gonna resolve this X, Y, and Z with me, but then like a week later they passed away, and it was the person's feeling that their parent didn't want to deal with what they said they were going to deal with, and kind of like on some subconscious level was like, all right, got to get out of here, like peace out. And they said that. And first of all, I was thankful that they felt like they could say something like that to me, because I'm always really comfortable with talking about grief and death and all the complicated feelings that come from those things, probably because I'm a nine.
I was gonna
But
say you're like a really good home for all of those messy things. Yeah.
oh, totally. Like you could really say anything to me and I would be like, sounds, yeah, that sounds normal. All right. But anyways, I just, her reflection about her parent passing made me think, wow, that was such a nine reflection of, I have this choice. Do I resolve it or do I not? And maybe on some levels, it's not all conscious. Sometimes it's subconscious, but I think that energy is really blowing up collectively of, all
Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the what you were saying earlier about eight, and we're all butting heads and we're all coming up against something, but we're all in this emotional spot. That is so eight and nine in this way that I can't even begin to explain, but obviously will. So when we're thinking about August, in some ways, I actually don't feel like the year has really started yet.
I know.
Because, yeah, because in September, we're going to have this concentration of nine energy, and then we're literally going to go back to the jump with, well, 10, but one energy. And so that happens to us every year. I do just want to say it's kind of like Mercury retrograde where people are like, oh no. And it's like, well, that happens 4 times a year and we've survived them all. So it's actually like, you're going to be fine. That's kind of how I feel about numerological cycles is that in every year, there's more than 9 months. So you're going to flip to a new cycle at some point in every year. We go through transitions all the time. That being said, there's something interesting about this confluence of nine energy coming at us in September that I do think the other side of that, the last couple months of the year, will feel different than the previous 9 months of the year have. So I'm looking forward to that. But we have to make it through the final boss, which is in a lot of ways August. So we're going to be okay.
Ooh.
We're all going to make it. But eight energy packs a huge punch. So eight is an emotional number. That's why I wanted to get back to emotional. Eight is the largest of the emotional numbers. So it's the deepest of the emotional numbers. It's also those emotions that we can't really talk about. It's like the parts of us that we don't really know how to verbalize what we're feeling. It's absolutely those trauma responses or autonomic sympathetic nervous system reactions where we don't know what we're doing until we're already halfway through doing it. And then we're like, oh shit, I'm in total flight, fight, freeze, whatever the fuck, you know? So I think there's an interesting thing that's going to happen with emotions and trying to overcome them or trying to meet them with some kind of mental rationale, like some kind of logic that nine would really like us to be removed a bit from our emotions in order to move forward, which is kind of what your friend was bravely sharing as well of saying like I can remove myself from the emotional depth and grief of death long enough to make this kind of cheeky reflection about what my parent may or may not have wanted to face in their lives. That feels very much the energy of August, which is if we can take some distance, if we can create any kind of separation between us and our emotions and not not stamp them out at all. We need to have our rational brain be in conversation with our emotions. But it definitely, eight is conflict. Eight is like the ordeal. So this fight we're gearing up to have might happen in might happen in August, it feels. Yeah.
Well, I cannot tell you how spot on that is with the astrology of August. And I would have talked about this in the section one, but funny enough, Venus and Jupiter are both meeting in Cancer.
Woo.
And these are the planets in Hellenistic terms, we call these the benefic planets. They're the good planets. They bring good things. They are the good luck and abundance and love. However, too much benefic is also excess. And when I think of an excess of Cancerian energy, I think of some sort of emotional landmine that, can get stepped on. And, there's something there about just how we trigger each other unknowingly and how much subconsciously even our partners, our friends, our bosses are mirroring something we might not even consciously think about, so there's a lot of inner child stuff, I think, coming up in August.
Woo. Yeah, because I think with all that deep stuff, eight is the underworld journey. So whatever that means to you. And I love that you brought up Venus and Jupiter because Jupiter always strikes me as more of a 10-1 energy because of the Wheel of Fortune. But Venus is absolutely tied to the number eight. I mean, just the Venus cycle being 8 years, there being,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot to Venus and eight. And also, eight, there are beautiful aspects of eight. Of course, we've gone straight for the heavy hitters, but like, eight is the number of money and abundance and resourcing. So, like, I'm hopeful that all three of those things, which are all basically the same thing, whatever our energetic resources are, I hope that those are really beautiful in August. I hope that we feel like we can take action around our resources, whether we need resourcing or we need to offer resourcing, we'll be able to see and do and feel good about all of that kind of shared resources and exchange kind of eighth house stuff around money.
Hmm.
Eight is also all about power and being empowered and being embodied, being in our bodies. So, double-edged sword, if you don't have a great working relationship with your meat suit, and that's okay. Mine is ever shifting as well. But I feel like eight, we could all feel really confident and powerful and like all those really nice Leo things that offer us a really glamorous, kind of luxurious, Venusian, beautiful experience. That being said, yes, this idea of we're all getting our buttons pressed and we don't even really know how or why. And then we're going to struggle to tell people about it because Mercury's still going to be retrograde for part of the month of August. And so we're not exactly going to be able to communicate clearly how we're feeling anyway, let alone for the first 11, 12 days, however long it's going to last. So I definitely do see tempers flaring, miscommunications popping off into something else, these reactions that we can't really control just taking over. And so that's why nine is saying like, hey, this too shall pass. This won't last forever. And it might not be that deep. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. We can ask questions, but like nine would always say maybe it's not that deep before anything else, while holding on to the fact that like it definitely could be, but we just need to do a little digging before we all fly off the handle in August.
I think that's actually very wise. Like, there's a balance between validating your own emotions and feeling what you're feeling, and also knowing that emotions are often irrational. And when you believe every single emotional story that comes through your system, then you actually are in hell on earth, you know? And I say that as a triple water sign, you know?
Yeah,
uh,
don't worry. Cancer, Sun, and Venus in the eighth house. We are here to play. Yeah.
right, you get it, you get it. And I do think you said that earlier. There's a little bit of a imbalance maybe between so much emotional energy and trying to grasp what is mental and rational in August. Especially Mercury is retrograde as well in August. So literally our planet of communication and our intellect is gone somewhere else. He's thinking about other things. So,
Yeah.
it makes sense that maybe we're struggling with this. As far as meat suit and money stuff, which come in with eight,
That's
I
a
mean,
great
that's,
indie band name. Meat
yeah,
suit and money stuff.
we should call that the episode. The alternative title
Yes.
is meat suit and money stuff. But there's, first of all, that's very eighth house, because the eighth house is our shared resources and taxes, loans, insurance, inheritance. But eighth house is also emotional and karmic inheritance. So, for instance, if we grew up in a house where the meat suit or our body, the human body was a very emotionally loaded thing, oh gosh, make sure you eat your vegetables, or you're eating that, or you're wearing that. That is more eighth house than people think. And
Hmm.
those beliefs that we have, I think about both money and our bodies, are kind of the surface level of a different wound. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately in like my own personal relationship with my body, and just like how messed up my whole maternal line is with their bodies. And I mean, who isn't,
Who
guys? Let me know.
amongst us?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
Who amongst us doesn't have that wound? But anyways, this is all making me think about how the body wound that I personally see play out in my family dynamics all the time, and then I see it play out in my own thoughts. Um, I'm thinking about how there's like such a deeper story than just I look fat today, or like how why is my face doing that? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just so much deeper, and that's what 8 feels like it's getting at a little bit. Like, are you sure you went deep enough? Like
Yeah. Yeah, this is so juicy. Thank you for saying all of this. And I never thought to put that kind of work into the eighth house, but it makes so much sense. And yes, I mean the eight is our body, so of course. And it makes me think of food as just zeroing in on that one. Um, it makes me think of food as a resource. And so that is something that if we had a caretaker who was restricting our resources based on their twisted beliefs, which I'm going to say twisted. Somebody else might not. Somebody else might be like, that sounds great. For me, it sounds twisted. But, and I had a caretaker who withheld resources in this way. But that's like, I would like to, that's very nine, eight, and nine. That's someone saying, based on my belief system, what I think about the world, my
yeah.
perspective, nine. I'm going to restrict your resources, your physical resources, so that your body does not take in what I do not want it to take in, or so that your body does take in what I want it to take in. But that's a control thing, like that's a restriction of resource. And so, yeah, I think that I would be so curious to hear from all of us, myself included, at the end of August to see what something in this same it doesn't have to be exactly food, but there are ways in which our childhoods and our caretakers and their viewpoints on a body absolutely impact how we treat ourselves as grown-ups.
Of
So they tell
course.
me, I don't know.
Of
I don't know why I'm
course.
putting salt in the room and I hate it.
Well, I'm thinking like of course we would go that direction because we both have the Cancerian karma of
Yeah.
nurturing and things like that. So of course we're going this direction, but the listener could go a different direction about
Yeah.
how, the material world and our material beliefs, whether it's about food or money or feeling safe, even like all of that, how
Yeah.
there's probably, yeah, that underlying, there's some underlying story that might be realized in August, I think, in some way. One more thing I'll add to the food conversation because it's just so kismet that you talked about that. Yesterday, I was with a client and I posed to them something that I've posed to a lot of my clients. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if someone's listening right now and I've said this to them. We all have our like little cliche pieces of advice then that we keep giving. But I said, the easiest way to connect with your inner child, I think, is to ask them, what do you want for breakfast today? Or what do you want for lunch today? And I actually challenge everybody who's listening to do that more in August, just as a practice of inner child connection. Sometimes it's not this big thing where we're digging deep into big traumas. Maybe that's how inner child work is from the outside looking in, but sometimes it's literally just like, hey dude, like what do you want for breakfast? And like
Yeah.
giving that part what it wants, that's very healing. That's more healing than we tend to give that, we would give it credit for.
100%. I mean, it makes me think about, and I'll just share my own childhood home. we never had kid food in the house. And that wasn't something that I realized as a child. That was something that other kids reflected back to me. Like when we go to your house, you never have any of the food we want to eat. Like I was like an almond household, you know. My parents were like, you can have this apple and this handful of nuts. And everybody else had like Doritos and whatever. So if I were to ask my inner child one morning what she would want, and she said frozen toaster strudels, my immediate response would be like, that is never something we would have for breakfast, you know, like
Yes,
it's
yes.
never something. And so giving in this example, getting the frozen toaster strudels and giving that to my inner child, we don't have to have that 7 days a week for breakfast, like
Right.
all things in moderation with maturity. But also me saying, no, you can't have that frozen toaster strudel. I'm just repeating the cycle that I
Exactly.
clearly on some level really want a fucking toaster strudel.
It's a perfect example. Yes. And it feels so 8, 9. Like
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I need to end the cycle in some way and also keep the sort of extreme nature of 9 in mind, and maybe like approach it from a place of maybe just a little bit more of a neutral perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
actually think in this way of thinking about things, nine helps out eight because eight is indulgence. Eight is the one who would have, yes, like I'm on an eight life path, so I can say this very clearly. Like eight would have this toaster strudel 7 days a week for breakfast, and then be like, why do I feel terrible? Like I haven't looked at a nutrient in months. So I actually think in this case, where eight really does want to indulge and wants the little treat, I think there are people out there who could stand to let themselves feel a little bit more pleasure. And then there are definitely those of us who like need to reel it in every once in a while and like, eat a vegetable or like get something done. And so I think nine is going to be helpful in terms of making sure that we are giving ourselves the little treat, but not to excess, like you were talking about earlier, to bring that word excess back. It's like too much of a good thing is still too much.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. Wow. This is a big month, and it makes me curious. I'm so grateful you reminded me that September is like the end, and then October is always a 10-1. And it just makes me kind of curious about this chunk of the year, the 8, 9, 10/1, and
Yeah.
everything that's gonna come up. And part of me is like, how could more come up? But
Oh my
then,
God. Yeah. I mean, I'm not happy saying any of this out loud.
oh no, not me neither. Me neither. The other thing too I wanted to say is that it really doesn't feel like this year has ever started. And I
Mhm.
wonder, you said that earlier, I wonder if it's the 9 energy of like it's more of the ending than the beginning?
I think so too, which is why then when we get into the beginning energy of 10-1 energy in October, doubled this year because nine goes away. And so we have this double one energy going on. I do feel like that's the beginning of the 1 year. Like we're going to get an extra 3 months of starting energy. That being said, I mean, nine is not over till it's over. So I do think we'll be energetically and all the other things wrapping things up for the rest of the year. So I don't want to say, too much about like you won't have to say goodbye to anything after October. Like obviously that's not the vibe I'm bringing to the function. But I do think if you're looking to start something, look to October to start something. Look to September. Actually, double nine energy can be really fruitful for starting things because it's like, what seeds are you planting after you pull the weeds out of the soil? Now you have this soil ready to go. So like what are you
Yes.
starting? But even I'll just say an example from my own life. Like I'm starting grad school in the fall and I'm literally starting on the last day of September. So it's not really September. It's really
Yeah.
October. But it's like I'm planting that seed of starting energy right at the end of that double nine. And that to me, I'm like, yeah, of course. Of course I'm doing that. Yes.
That's amazing. Wait, just out of curiosity, I read about this, but will you tell the listeners what you are going to start grad school for?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for asking. I'm going to start a 2-year clinical master's in psychology program. And it's actually geared towards licensure as a licensed family and marital therapist in my state of California. So hopefully, this is like instead of going to a longer, kind of more theory based research program. I'm going to like a very clinically practical program that's like training me up to help. Well, I hope to help queer and disabled people, but anybody and everybody.
That's amazing. And how cool is it that well, you're going to be the smartest one in the class because you already have so much experience holding space for people. You are spiritually and intuitively in tune. And granted, most clinical programs won't emphasize the importance of that, but I'll just emphasize it even though I have no authority. Like, that is so important. So you already have like bada bing, bada boom. I mean, you just need the
Thank
paper and
you.
then you're going to be amazing.
Thank you. I really deeply receive and appreciate that. And yes, it does feel like a very right next step for me in terms of learning and expanding in areas that I really do want to grow in that are a little bit more clinical and a little bit more by the book, so to speak, mirrored, not mirrored, but like paired with everything that I already do, it feels like a nice next step. I'm excited.
Oh, it's awesome. And maybe to like wind down our 8-9 August 2025 discussion. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot too much with this, but is there a day or a few days that you're looking at the numerology of in August and thinking, oh, that's kind of a cool day? Slash, a different kind of side question would be 8-8. It's
Yes, let's talk
we
about AA.
let's talk about 8-8 then, because I know, a lot of people in the spiritual community tend to make a big deal about 8-8, and I'm not
Yes,
yucking the yum, but I just want to know what you think about the 8-8
100%.
coming up.
It's no surprise to me that a number like 8 would be mired in this controversy of like, this got out of hand. This got way too big and symbolic for people. And yet, now that it's out there, and we'll just say the words Lionsgate portal, like now that it's out there, it is real, right? Because so many people believe it. And that's very 8-9 as well, is like, what is real, quote unquote, only matters as much as people believe into it, practice it, buy into it, whatever language you want to use. So now we have this thing, the Lionsgate portal, which happens on 8/8, apparently. I'm not a Lionsgate portal girly. However, I do love the doubled numbers in any month. So 8/8 is definitely a day that I look at. It packs a powerful punch. If you do the numerology of 8/8, you will get 16, which is 7. Spoiler alert. And 7 is can be a little nasty. So I always think it's really funny. Yeah, seven's like intense. I mean, we're 7, we just moved through a total 7 portal with July. It's just like we're always kind of mired in something, whether that's a good thing because we're down a creative, curious rabbit hole, or we just can't get out of that fucked up situation and we're like, whatever it is. Like 7 brings this intensity to it. And so That's why I think it's so, and a spiritual intensity too. Seven is the number of spirituality and secrets. So the idea that on 8/8, which is actually a 7 day, we would be mired in this idea of, is this thing real? How much power are we giving to this spiritual mystery? Nobody can really tell you how the Lionsgate portal started. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels so yes to me. That being said, I think a little bit gird your loins on 8/8. It's just a lot of energy. Like that's my practical advice for 8/8. It's a great day for spiritual action, for taking spiritual action. So if you want to do a ritual, again, around 8 themes: money, abundance, karma, cycles, resources, the body, power, confidence, all these things, all these like big energetic constructs, do it. I'm totally encouraging of everyone to do magic on these quote unquote high holy days. Do it. Um, that being said, yeah, I just think it's really 7/8 that this is even happening.
I absolutely, that is the best explanation of the Lionsgate portal I've ever received. And yes, I think that's honestly the perfect way to wrap up our numerology report, which is Lionsgate portal, gird your loins.
Gird your
And
loins. Yeah. Yeah, I just think everyone's gonna be like at at their most. Like everyone's going to be doing the most that day. And that just is kind of the vibe. So if you want to do the most, do the most. And if you don't, you just, there's no FOMO here. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
I don't know FOMO at all. I don't know them.
No, we only know JOMO, the joy of missing out on the Lionsgate portal.
Oh, oh my God. And I feel like Cancer placements in general only know Jomo.
Yeah, we're like, we'd actually rather cancel. If you'd
No,
like
we'd
to
rather
cancel on
not
us,
go.
yeah, 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 it's cool.
One of
Yeah.
my friends recently told me they're like, Mal, I love you, but you have to stop saying maybe to me and just say no because I know you're going to say no. I was like, you know what? You're right. You're so right. I'm so sorry. Like it's
It's a
always
no. It's a
it's a no.
no. Yeah, the
Ah,
other dates I will say for August is I do always look to the moons, like the numerology of the new moon and the full moon. So you just add up the date until you get a single digit. And I have not done my math yet for these moons as of recording this, but I've been tracking some of the larger cycles of lunar numerology, so to speak. And we're in wild cycles this year. All of our full moons, all of our new moons are landing on like the same numerological days. And it's only happened for a section of the year. So we're beginning and ending in different energies, and we're getting these huge swaths in the middle of new moons and full moons that land on either 4 or 8. 8 is one of our numbers this year. So I always look to those dates, and one of them might be shifting that in August, which if it is, I'm looking to it because I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Because I do feel like the moons have been giving us another layer of stability and kind of consistency where while the sky all shifts around. I feel like the lunar numerology has been giving us another opportunity of like revisiting the same energy kind of over and over again. So definitely, if you're a moon lover, do that moon numerology in August and see how you can
yes.
work with those numbers.
That's amazing. I love it. Yeah, and I'll put that somewhere in part one. Yeah, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put it up there. And if not, we'll put it in the show notes with the
Cool.
podcast listeners. But B, this was awesome. Like truly thank you for spending your energy on this today. And I'm so glad that we got to talk numerology and any like upcoming offerings or things you want to shout out. Of course, we'll have it in the show notes too, but just anything that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This was a total honor and pleasure to use energy on. It's so good to see you. I love talking about this. I could go on for hours. But yes, I'm really on my Substack newsletter these days. So my website is rebeccaskolnick.com. And then my Substack is rebeccaskolnick.substack.com. So super straightforward. And either one of them will lead you to the other location at some point. But on Substack, I do weekly numerological food for thought. I hesitate to call them forecasts, but weekly numerological forecasts or food for thought. And that's for a paid subscription. And then my paid pals also this summer got access to written numerology readings. So that makes me sound like I'm behind a paywall. And I promise there's so much free stuff on the Substack too. But just saying that while my energy and my capacity is a little lower, I've been kind of just honing in and serving the people that are also supporting me. And it's been a really lovely exchange. So if you're interested in working with me, please subscribe on Substack. It's $5 a month, or there's a yearly rate. So it's like less than a cup of coffee, basically, for a whole month of weekly content. And then, yeah, if you're interested in working with me one on one, you can always get in touch as well through my website.
That's awesome. Yeah. Rebecca's Substack's where it's at. Love it. It's one of
Thank you.
my favorite Substacks. So don't sleep on that. Well, thanks so much, B. And of course, I'm manifesting our next episode too, whenever that
Yes.
may be. And thanks so much again for coming on.
Thank you, Mal.